Now we're going to take a look at the basic interface of Photoshop CS6. On the left here we have our tools. On the top here we have our options. Now these are directly associated with which tool you have selected at the moment. Over on the right we have our other panel sets here. Now I have this set up to the Essentials workspace, which is the default when you open Photoshop for the first time. If you've made changes to your workspace already and you'd like to get to the Essentials workspace so that you can follow along with this tutorial, you can either choose from this drop down menu here, Essentials, or go up here to Window, Workspace, Essentials. Now if you're comfortable with the layout you already have, but you want to follow along with this tutorial, you can choose New Workspace, give your workspace a name, click Save, and then you can come back and reload that workspace at a later time. Now we're going to take a look at the tools in the toolbar over on the left here. We're going to first take a look at some of our selection tools. We have our Marquee tools here. Now whenever you see a little tiny arrow in the bottom right corner of a tool, that means you can click and hold and choose a different version of this tool. Right now we have Rectangular Marquee tool selected. And what this allows us to do is make a rectangular selection by clicking and dragging anywhere on the canvas. So we have this area selected. We can choose the Move tool here, click within the selection, and drag this away. Now you'll see this red coming through in the back. That's because our background color is set to red. While we have this selected still, we can move this around the screen. To unselect this item, you can click on your Marquee tool again and click anywhere else on the screen. Now it's unselected. And once this is unselected, we cannot move this selection anymore. It has now become part of this layer. And this is what's considered destructive editing. This is what's considered destructive editing. Now it's not as negative as it sounds, however non-destructive editing is a much better workflow, and we'll talk about non-destructive editing later on. If we click and hold on our Marquee tools, we can take a look at the other options here. We have a circular Marquee tool, which we can drag out and make a circular selection. Now if you want this to be a perfect circle, while clicking, hold down the Shift key, and this will force it to be constrained to a perfect circle. This is also true with our rectangular Marquee tool. If we want a perfect square, click and drag while holding Shift, and you'll get a perfect square. Now it's important to note that you hold Shift after clicking and dragging, because holding Shift before you click and drag is a different function. This allows you to add to your selection. So if we hold Shift before we click and drag, you'll see a little plus sign show up next to our cursor. If we keep holding Shift and we click and drag, we can add to our selection. And you can do this as many times as you want. Now if you want to constrain your selection to a square while adding, hold down Shift, click and drag, release Shift, and hold it again. Now you can combine the selection tools by switching to your elliptical Marquee tool, hold down the Shift key, get your plus sign there, and add to your selection. Again, to release your selection, using the Marquee tool, click anywhere outside of the selection. Now our other Marquee tools are a single row and a single column. And what this does is select a single line, 1 pixel, all the way across, or with the column tool, all the way down. Now let's take a look at our lasso tools. If we click and hold, the first tool is our lasso tool. This is kind of a free form selection. We can click and draw the selection that we want, let go, and there you have it. Just like the marquee tools, if we hold down shift and start clicking and dragging again, we can add to our selection. Or if we click out of it, we can get rid of our selection. Now with the marquee tool, you could try to select my face here. However, there are better tools to do this more accurately. Let's take a look at the other lasso tools. The polygonal lasso tool allows you to select, still pretty freeform, only with lines instead. Each time you click, creates another point in the selection. Lastly, we have our magnetic lasso tool. Photoshop will automatically try to figure out what it is you're trying to select. So if I click down here by the base of my arm and start running up my arm, you'll see that it kind of snaps to my arm. And what it's doing is finding, now we'll run into problems when there's not a lot of contrast between what we're trying to select and what's outside of what we're trying to select. So once we get up here towards where the light is hitting my arm, you'll see the lasso tool start to stray. Now it's trying to form to my tattoo there, and now to my wedding ring. Now if you wanted to get rid of some of these, you can hit the backspace key and go back. Now if the automatic selection is not working very well, you can start clicking and making your own points while you notice it kind of going astray here. And you can have a little more control over what it does. To do an even better job, you might want to be zoomed in. But you can see how this speeds things up and is a lot more accurate than using the standard lasso tool. Now below the lasso tools, we have the magic wand tool and the quick selection tool. The magic wand tool works in a similar way to the magnetic lasso tool in that it tries to find the selection you're looking for. And it does this based on color and contrast in the image. So if we want to try and select my shirt, click somewhere in the shirt. It's trying to find similar pixels. Now if you come up to your options, one of the things you can change to refine this selection is your tolerance. Right now it's at 32. If we change this to a lower number, like 10, the amount of selection we get is going to be smaller. And in layman's terms, this is the kind of the range of pixels or color value that it's going to select when you click. So if we take this up to say 50, we're going to get a lot more. Now you'll notice I'm trying to select my shirt, but I'm getting all this other stuff over here. We can choose the contiguous option here, and this will constrain the selection to the area which we're selecting in, rather than the entire document. So let's try and click again, and you'll see now we're just selecting pieces of my shirt. Now again, we're not selecting all of it, and to do this well, you can play with the tolerance and some of these other options up here to get what you want. You can also use the shift key to get your plus sign up here and add to the selection by clicking in another area. So you see now we're adding more of the shirt as we click. Now this is a little less accurate than the magnetic lasso, you have a little less control over what's being selected. This is much better for broader areas. For instance, the computer monitor over here. If we click over here, you'll see we got almost everything except for the little taskbar at the bottom. Now let's choose the quick selection tool. This is also similar to the magic wand tool, except for you paint your selection. So you have a brush here, which you can come up here to your options and change the size of your brush, which we'll talk about brushes a little bit later. But right now with our brush, we can click and drag and start painting, and it's going to try and find similar pixels and color values. But as you see, this can get a little out of hand as well. But now we can subtract from this, as we can do with the other tools that we used earlier. Just like using the Shift key to add, we can hold down Alt and subtract. So if I'm holding down Alt and I click, this will start taking away from the selection. So now we've got a pretty good handle on the shirt here. There's some areas here where we could refine the selection. But overall, we've done a pretty good job. Now let's take a look at our crop tool. Now there's some newer options in here that we might talk about later. But the crop tool is a pretty essential tool here. Let's first click somewhere out of our selection with the regular marquee tool here. Click on our crop tool, and you'll see this kind of bounding box show up here with these handles on the edges. And we can click and drag and kind of refine our selection here. And when I let go, this will go ahead and crop our image. Now this is non-destructive at the moment. If I let go, it'll crop. However, we have the ability to continue changing our selection and pulling more back in. However, once we've got our selection and we're happy with it, we can either go up here to the check mark here and commit the operation, or we can hit the Enter key and that will finalize it. Now that again was a destructive edit. If we come in here and try to recrop, everything outside of the canvas is now gone and it's just being filled in with the background color. If we hit Enter, that'll commit to the crop, and now this is our image. So that's a quick look at some of the selection tools in Photoshop CS6.